for this video, I am going to start off with the worst book. So the worst book that I read in January was The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. So I bought these books, I bought the whole series, unfortunately, when the Bridgerton show started. And I did watch the show before I read the books. Started reading the first book when the second season came out, and I wasn't super into it. And then I decided to finish it because I was going to try to read all of them before the fourth season came out. And I didn't find myself enjoying it particularly because I had the contrast of the show. And I feel like the show just really adds a lot more sort of background material, I would say, to the story. There's no Queen Charlotte in the books. The Lady Whistledown gossip, things happening behind the scenes really doesn't happen as much in the book. It's more just the one central couple, and then that's all you see. So I didn't love that because I'm not a big romance person. I will read romance if there's a lot of other stuff happening in the story, but when it's just the romance, it doesn't really do it for me. Other thing that was a huge problem with this book, which is why I won't be continuing the series. Unfortunately, I did buy 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 of the books, but I don't think I am going to continue, which is because there's a huge issue with a SA scene happening in the book and it really not being addressed properly. You know, there's a time and place for that in media, but it needs to be addressed properly, and it just wasn't taken as a serious matter, mostly because it was a girl doing it to a guy, and so I feel like it wasn't taken seriously by the author, and for me that just turned me off from the whole series and made me really not enjoy this book. I didn't even really want to finish it beyond that point. So that was the worst book that I read in January. And a lot of my books that I read this month were either audiobooks or I got them from the library, so I no longer have the physical copies. But I will show you a picture of the next one I read, which was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. This book was actually, it was really interesting, I will say. I read it all in one sitting because I was so into it, and it felt like it was building and building, and it felt like there was going to be this big reveal at the end, and I thought I was going to be like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that was the ending. I thought it was all going to come together. And I will say maybe it was my fault for expecting that at the end of this book, because after sitting and thinking about it for almost a month now, I do think maybe that wasn't the author's intention. I just think that books with that kind of open ending, especially when it's so suspenseful and it's so mysterious up until the end of the book, are not for me. I like to have I don't like an open ending. That's just me personally. So it's nothing to do with the writing, because the writing was actually really interesting. The premise of the story, which is about this person who he calls himself Piranesi, and he lives in this maze, and there's like all these really unique things about the maze, and the way that he speaks and the way that he thinks is really, really interesting. Like, I was captivated, and I wasn't bored when I was reading this book. But the ending freaked me out, and I don't want to spoil it, but the ending is odd. It's a weird book. If you're a weird book girly, you're gonna love it. And it was well written. It just wasn't for me. So I rated that one 3.5 stars. The next couple books that I'm going to talk about are, I've been reading the ACOTAR series. So I read the last 3 books in the series this month. A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. I did like this one. I was getting into this series at this point, although I do have to say personally, like, the main issue that I have with the ACOTAR series is, I guess, more Feyre. I find fantasy books to be annoying when it's like, oh, of course you're a plain girl and your family's starving, but you're strong enough to string a bow, and of course every fairy you meet in the fairyland is in love with you, and of course even though you're a plain human, they all think you're the most beautiful woman in the world. Like, of course, everything conveniently works out for you. And that's something that I kind of found annoyed me. And then I will say another thing, I do like the world building of this book, but sometimes the writing style gets a little bit repetitive, and I find it just takes me right out of the story, because over the course of like 20 or 30 pages, maybe it's more because I was listening to it over audiobook, but a certain phrase will be repeated over and over with a bunch of different characters, and it fully like takes me out of the experience of the book, and it got on my nerves so much that I felt like I had to mention it in my review. So I did like A Court of Wings and Ruin because Feyre becomes a little bit less helpless. She becomes a lot more interesting. She does some things that I know a lot of people in the fandom after finishing the book, they're like debating whether it was like morally good for her to do that. So there's like a little bit of moral ambiguity there, which I find really interesting. I think it helps to round out a character well, especially because it's placed during wartime. Like, of course, people are not going to make the perfect choice every time. And I think it's actually interesting as an author for you to choose for your characters to not necessarily make the right choice every single time, because I feel like that can make a character boring. And then the next book that I read in the series, I kind of made a little mistake. I started reading A Court of Silver Flames because I didn't realize that there was a novella in between A Court of Wings and Ruin and A Court of Silver Flames. So then I had already started A Court of Silver Flames, and I was, I think 30 minutes into the audiobook, and I listened to it on like 1.5 speed. So I was a decent way into the book. So everything that had already been covered in A Court of Frost and Starlight, like I had already kind of figured out through context clues what had happened in that book. So I kind of felt like I was reading it just to read it. It did allow for Nesta's character to become a lot more well-rounded for her story in A Court of Silver Flames. I only rated it 3 stars, but I will say I think I would have rated it higher had I actually read that first, but it felt like almost kind of pointless to read in terms of plot. Character development, it was good to read, but in terms of plot, it felt kind of pointless for me to read. But that's my mistake. It's not the author's mistake. A Court of Silver Flames, I loved. I rated this 4.5 stars, and I loved it so much because I relate more personally to Nesta, you know, someone who, you know, in juxtaposition to Feyre, who is almost kind of like, not to come across as saying the wrong thing, but like she's almost sort of like the perfect heroine, the perfect victim of her trauma, whereas Nesta has kind of a more aggressive and abrasive approach, which I think is super interesting. And I love that Sarah J. Maas chose to have the 3 sisters react really differently to their life experiences, because of course that's going to happen in real life, and all the sisters aren't going to react the same way. I like Nesta's character. I loved her character development. I love that we got to see her at rock bottom, and then we got to see her slowly build herself up. I love that the romance came in right at the end and not during the process of her healing herself. Because I feel like that was like Feyre's story, where she's healing and then she's like, the man that I'm with is helping me, he's putting me back together, but Nesta does that herself, which I really like. I think it's great. I think she's a super unique character, and definitely my favorite out of all the sisters, so I love reading a book about her. If the next book that comes out is about Elaine, I may not be as excited to read it, but I really enjoyed reading Nesta's book. The next book that I read in January, I came in right at the end with this one. I finished this the evening of January 31st, is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have read this before. This was a reread, and I love this book. I love the whole sort of, I guess, I don't think it's even a series. It's just there's 5 or 4 Taylor Jenkins Reid's books that are intertwined with characters, and I love her writing style with all of them. They all focus around a celebrity in some way. Like there's Daisy Jones and the Six, there's the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Carrie Soto is Back, and Malibu Rising. So there's only 4. And I love all of them. I think they're really interesting, but there's something about Carrie Soto is Back that I really love. And she is just a really interesting character. And I don't watch tennis, but I actually did find this interesting. I don't watch tennis, so I don't know how accurate it actually is to the game. But normally with books, when they're sports, I kind of like find myself really uninterested in that. I'm like, okay, where's the plot? I get it. They're playing a game. She wins. Oh my goodness. But with Carrie Soto is Back, I was actually really fascinated, and I was like almost on the edge of my seat being like, okay, like, is she gonna, and I'm like trying to learn the rules of tennis as I'm reading it. So I gave that one 4.5 stars as well. And the next book that I read in January was Jesus and John Wayne by Kristen Kobes de Mez. which is about how white evangelicals corrupted a faith and fractured a nation. So this was a really interesting read, kind of focusing on this idea of how Jesus from the Bible is so different to the Jesus you view when you think of like the American nature of Christianity and Christian nationalism. It was a super good read, very interesting, very well informed. There were certain parts of the book that I felt sort of veered off topic and almost like very long tangents that went on for really large portions of the book. I wish it had focused a little bit more on the title, and I felt like the titles focused, Jesus and John Wayne and American evangelicals, kind of only focused on maybe a third of the book, and then the rest was other stuff, which was all informative and interesting. But I would have loved to read a book that focused like solely on the Jesus and John Wayne idea. But the book was very well written. I gave it 4 stars. The last book for January was Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This was an amazing read. I have to rank this as my favorite one of January, purely because I read it throughout the course of a week, I think. And yeah, a week. And the whole time that if I was at work or if I was driving and I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about the world building, and I was thinking about, like, it always came up in my mind because the way that the vampires are phrased, the way that the vampires are created in this book is that they live forever and ever. Again, like, vampires can only be with a, like, stake in the heart, or, you know, the common vampire myths are pretty frequent throughout the book. But there's this idea of, as they live longer and longer, they lose more and more of their humanity and therefore more and more of their morality. And then it's kind of this really cool idea of, like, is death what makes us human in a way? And that, on top of the way we got to see the character, it focuses on 3 characters, one from the Middle Ages, one from the early Middle Ages, and one from 2019. And the way we see that first character from the 1500s, like, slowly become more and more corrupt and lose more and more of herself was so interesting to me. I loved it. It was an amazing book, and I gave that 4.5 stars purely because I did find, like, the lore, I guess, of the vampires so interesting that I wanted that to be expanded upon more. And I feel like sometimes it focused more on the relationships, like, woven in between, and I would have loved to see, like, a more well-rounded world. The book is very long, but I feel like it could have been, certain parts could have been taken out and more world building added in. But overall, amazing book, 4 out of 5 stars. So that was everything I read in January, with my stats for genre being most read fantasy, second fiction, third romance, fourth historical fiction, and fifth literary fiction. Then my average rating so far for the year comes in at a 3.6. One thing I will say is I do actually need to sit down and create a proper rating system for myself, because I do rate solely based on vibes as soon as I close the book. So whatever I'm feeling in that moment is what I go with as the rating, like the stars rating. And I do find myself, like, I only read reviews of the book that have spoilers after I finish the book, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that was a really good point, maybe I do agree with that. And so that does change my mind a little bit. And then as well, I will look back on a book like many months later and be like, oh really, I rated that 5 stars, I don't think that was a 5-star read. So I do need to go and create a proper rating system for myself, and I think that will really help things become more consistent, because when I look at an average rating of 3.6 stars, I do feel like I enjoyed all the books I read this year more than that, and it's sort of not fair, at least from my statistics perspective. Like, I'm sure the authors don't care and about my singular review on my little YouTube channel, but I feel like it's not fair from my own personal statistics to look back and it be inaccurate, because then all my stats are wrong. And I love my reading stats. I use every reading app there is, basically. I have Goodreads, I have Fable, I have Margins, I have Storygraph. maybe I'll do a video on my favorite, but I update to all of those because they all have different features that I sort of love, and I love the stats, so I will use every single one. And it makes it difficult because if I want to update my progress on one book, I have to go through 4 different apps. So maybe I should consolidate, but they all have cool features and I love them all. Thanks again for watching, you guys. Comment down below if you've read any of the books that I read this month, or if you have one that you're looking forward to this year. And also feel free to comment your reading goal for books down below for 2026. My personal goal is going to be 52 books, 1 for every week. We'll see how it goes. So far I am at 9, so it's pretty steady. Goodreads says that I am 6 ahead of schedule, so that is good news for me. And comment down below what your reading goal is for this year. Thanks for watching.